You know, if you wind up enjoying this one, you can say you really had a wonderful time. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to my channel. Today, we're talking about a brand new VOD release, Willy'S Wonderland. Before we begin, let me know in the comments what your thoughts on this movie were. If you already saw it, if you were excited for it, if you weren't planning on seeing it, let me know so we can discuss. Also, make sure to hit that thumbs up button if you like these reviews, as it helps me out immensely by getting my channel out there and growing the community. And if you are new here, I hope you consider hitting that subscribe button so you can stay up to date with reviews of new releases, older films, hidden gems, and so much more on a near daily basis. But let's not waste any more time and let's talk about Willy'S Wonderland. This stars Nicolas Cage as a quiet drifter who's tricked into a janitorial job at the now condemned Willy'S Wonderland. The mundane tasks suddenly become an all-out fight for survival against wave after wave of demonic animatronics. Fists fly, kicks land, titans clash, and only one side will make it out alive. This is written by Gl Parsons and is directed by Kevin Lewis, and this was probably one of the most hyped up movies over the past couple of months. And I admit, I was intrigued as well. I did include this on my most anticipated movies of the month segment, and basically a lot of the anticipation from the entire internet was due to the fact that this is more or less a movie version of Five Nights at Freddy's with Nicolas Cage. Even though an actual Five Nights at Freddy's movie is in the works, so I don't know there. Anyway, I actually really enjoy Nicolas Cage as an actor in general. I think as a totally serious performer, he is really solid, like in Leaving Las Vegas or his highly underrated starring role in Scorsese's Bringing Out the Dead. And I think he doesn't get enough credit for how great he can be playing a role completely straight-faced. But let's be honest, of course, it's his campier, more over-the-top material where it's at, especially now that he's so well known for taking roles in damn near anything. Now, I don't know if it was just me, but I felt like in the late 2000s and early 2010s, when he first started taking on more roles in really bad movies and lower-budget straight-to-DVD movies, there was a stigma towards the guy, I felt. It seemed like he was written off as a joke, or just a really bad actor in general for a few years. I could be totally wrong there, but that's the vibe I was getting based off what I was seeing at the time. But either way, it wasn't until the last few years, especially ever since Mandy in 2018, where audiences have really come back around to him and fully embraced how incredibly entertaining he can be in nearly anything. I will give him a lot of credit because the man will read the most ridiculous sounding line and give such dedication to it, so I just can't help but put a smile on my face each time he says something totally absurd. So I gotta admit, I was a bit disappointed to see how he doesn't utter a single word throughout this entire movie. Now, some people may be intrigued by this gimmick. It's supposed to be something in the style of like the man with no name, even though that character actually does speak, but you're supposed to get a little bit of a Western influence infused into this horror comedy, especially with the very desaturated color palette in the sequences before Cage actually enters Willys, and Cage's character doesn't even have a name here. He's only known as the janitor. His performance here relies more on facial expressions, and while it's not the same as if he was able to speak, where he'd have these ridiculous zingers and one-liners to spew, it's still not bad. There are moments where he'll have these dramatic stares for the most innocuous things, like just him opening the fridge every hour to grab a soda. Little things like that would be fun for what they were, though I'd still rather him speak. But what everyone came to this movie for was Cage beating up on evil animatronics in an over-the-top manner, and I think you won't be disappointed there, even though I feel the film could have still leaned into some of those elements a bit more. Like, it takes literally 40 minutes for the action to really get off the ground, outside of a brief opening sequence where we see two random characters inside Willys get killed off by the animatronics. And the first half of the film is a lot of setup. We get introduced to members of this town where Willys resides. There's a sheriff played by Beth Grant, who's trying to control her stepdaughter Liv, played by Emily Tosta, and we have to get to know her a bit. We find out she's trying to burn Willys down, and meanwhile we get a lot of cleaning montages with Cage before the action kicks in, which actually were kind of funny. Like, I didn't think Nicolas Cage in a speed cleaning montage would be something I'd enjoy, let alone even see in a movie, but here we are. But to my point, it still does take some time to get to Cage going to town on these things. And while I wish it played with the concept a little more than it ultimately did, once we do get to the carnage, it is pretty fun for what it is. And the animatronics themselves looked really good. What I enjoyed was that they didn't rely on CGI for the most part, and actually had people in costumes perform these characters. I'm always appreciative when movies like this go down this route, just because films these days rely so heavily on CGI that when we do get some practical effects like this, it's really refreshing from a visual standpoint. And here, as I said, the fights between Cage and the animatronics were pretty solid, as Cage beats down on these things in an over-the-top fashion as expected, and it's supported by some really stylish camera work as well as a much brighter color scheme than what we got in the first half. And they have the animatronics spout these one-liners before they go after him or any of the other characters. They also try to have them be this parody of classic slashers like Michael Myers and Freddy Krueger at various points through some of the atmospheric choices. Like, there's one scene in particular that's a clear parody of the 1-2 Freddy's Coming For You song you hear in A Nightmare on Elm Street, so that was kind of cute. And the film is meant to be nothing more than mindless B-movie entertainment, and as I said, it could have leaned into those elements more, but when it does, it delivers. I know this isn't something you go into thinking it's going to be one of the most clever, well-written screenplays around. Like, even when we get backstory on Willys itself, it's all done in one shot through exposition, smack in the middle of the movie, and it's clearly presented in a way as if the filmmakers just wanted to get it out of the way, which I understand. That being said, I still had some glaring issues with the movie that held me back from loving it like other campy B-movies. Two things, as I mentioned, were Cage being silent as well as how long it took to get to the action. But there's more. I'd say some of the character decisions here are incredibly baffling. Like, I know part of the fun with horror movies is how characters seem to make these horrible decisions that lead to their deaths or lead to something bad for another character, but in other films, there's still a sense of believability to them. Here, though, the decisions feel like they purposely defy logic and are kind of frustrating. Like, once the carnage kicks in, all the characters are clearly well aware of the danger they're in. For example, while I mentioned Liv plans on burning Willys down, I've yet to mention she's doing so along with a bunch of her friends. Now, I wasn't expecting them to be deep or anything like that. I know they're meant to be disposable characters, but it felt like they were legit all asking for what's coming to them. Some of them will see the animatronics begin to attack, and there are multiple instances of them standing there with the most confused looks on their faces, with no sense of urgency whatsoever, as if it hasn't clicked with them yet as to what's happening. And there are two characters who go off to have sex in one of the rooms at Willys, even though they know, walking into the place, how urgent it was to just go in there, get Cage, and leave. And it made no sense to me. Like, if they had no idea how bad this place was, that's one thing. But these were two people who clearly knew the implications of what would happen if they went in there, and they just decided to go take their time to sneak off and leave themselves vulnerable. It's really dumb, as is another really baffling decision where after one or two fights, Cage walks off and decides to just go drink soda and play pinball in one of the other rooms. We never know why he does that, and it seemingly has no consequence on anything, and while I said you don't necessarily go to these movies for character development, it would have been nice had we at least gotten a little more insight into his thought process, so at least it made this decision come off as somewhat believable, if at all. That's one of the big reasons why I wasn't always the biggest fan of Cage being silent for this movie, because he'll make these decisions and, other than overly dramatic stares, you never get a sense of why he's doing what he's doing. There's no rhyme or reason to certain decisions he makes. And all of this would have been somewhat forgivable if it wasn't for the two other big issues, which were the dialogue, as well as nearly everyone else's acting. I'd say Beth Grant as the sheriff is the one exception to the rule here, but just about everyone else who wasn't her or Cage, to be perfectly honest, is bad. And I mean really bad. And they're delivering dialogue that barely passes as first draft stuff. Like, when I heard that line in the trailer where Emily Toster goes, "He's not trapped in there with you, they're trapped in with him." Nice Watchmen reference, by the way. I got nervous, and unfortunately, it turned out to be a big indicator of how most of the dialogue is delivered here. I think part of the reason the dialogue was written the way it was to emulate that simplistic B-movie style, so I get that. But the delivery by some of these actors is really cringeworthy, and I try not to throw that description out there just for anything, but I couldn't get over it after a while. Like, there was no chemistry among nearly all these actors, especially Emily Tosta and all of her friends who go in to help Cage. And while I still think there's enough here that makes the movie fun enough, that's still really hard to totally get over. I'm gonna be honest, for all the hype this movie got, I don't think it fully lived up to it. I don't think Cage should have been silent. I think it took a bit too long to get to the action, and some of the acting, dialogue, and character decisions are a little hard to look past. Now, all that being said, I still thought the movie was decent for what it was. The second half of this movie saves this, especially because once it does get to Cage versus the animatronics, it does get considerably more entertaining. even with its glaring issues still present. The action was fun, Cage's facial expressions can be pretty funny, and some of the delivery of the dialogue does teeter on so bad it's good territory. Personally, I think it's a mixed bag, with the good just outweighing the bad, but I do think there's a chance you'll enjoy this if you like campy B movies. But unlike similar films, it's not totally guaranteed that that will be the case here. Willy'S Wonderland gets a 6.5 out of 10. So let me know, did you see Willy'S Wonderland, or are you planning to see it, and what were your thoughts? Do you have a good time with it? Do you have a favorite Nicolas Cage movie? Let me know in the comments below so we can discuss. Also, if you enjoyed this video, please like it and share it, and for more movie reviews and film discussion, please make sure to hit that subscribe button to stay updated. Thanks for watching everyone, and keep having fun with film.